Hello, everyone. Welcome into the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. Will Cooper and Art Mosley bringing it to you here on this October 24th, Tuesday. Hope you're all doing well. Art, how are you doing, my friend?
Coop, I am fantastic, like the NBA. You remember those old NBA commercials? You're fantastic.
No.
You don't remember that, do you?
No.
Oh, my gosh. I'm bringing up the NBA because actually yesterday, Monday, October 23rd, was the beginning of high school basketball season. For those that don't know, I am on staff at Cherokee High School as a basketball coach. I'm going to have the freshmen this year, and, man, it gets my blood going to be out there on the court and coaching and leading these young men. I completely understand the excitement, the energy that some of our football coaches have when they're out there. So, man, I'm excited about that. I'm also excited about playoff football.
Yeah.
We're talking about playoffs here in the next couple of weeks, and we've got a couple of teams for sure that are locked into playoff spots, and hopefully one more.
Yeah, we do have two that are clinched. Now, we can get up to three this year. That will depend on our friends at River Ridge and Etowah, who are the two that are competing for that last playoff spot. We'll fill all the fans in on that. Of course, the two that have locked their spots in are Sequoia and Creekview. Although, depending on what happens this week, they can cause some havoc, and we'll have to sit down and do some math and figure out where everybody actually ends up. But that's the playoff as it sits. Rome is also locked in, obviously. Which, speaking of Rome,
yes,
we do have a special guest joining us later in the podcast, a surprise guest, I think, in some regards. I believe he's our first out-of-county coach that we've had on this.
Our second, because in week one, at the very beginning of the season, we had Coach Bennett over from Cambridge join us. So we I don't want to say bookend because we do have at least a couple of more podcasts to go here on the North Georgia Sports Report. But Coach Bennett joined us in week one, and then we were fortunate enough to have, like you mentioned, a special guest because we have an out-of-county team. We got a county team versus an out-of-county team this week as Rome travels to play Creekview.
Well, you mentioned only a couple more podcasts, but we should mention the North Georgia Sports Report is now a mostly year-round podcast.
Yes, it is. So can you explain what's going on after football season, Coop?
Well, you alluded to it. Basketball season will be upon us, and we're not planning on slowing down. Unlike most of the other media outlets around Georgia where it's a football-centered thing and then basketball, maybe they write some articles about it. We will continue with the podcast, and we'll also do it through baseball season. I think, you and I have made the joke a lot of times. How many more times do Etowah and Woodstock have to play each other for a state title before somebody decides to cover baseball? Well, no more because we've decided to do it. So podcast will continue, the broadcasts will continue, and then everything on the website and players of the week, player of the game, all of that will continue as well. So we'll see how it goes. We invite you all to join us, though. So if you're a player that plays basketball or a parent that has a basketball family or a baseball, whatever, make sure you stay tuned because once we're going to give it due diligence. I think our plan is to stay with a season through the end,
sure,
no matter what it is. So don't think we're going to get to week 2 of the playoffs in high school football and go, okay, well, it's basketball season now, so we'll keep up with what happened. No, we'll follow it to its end, and that's how we'll keep this on track.
Absolutely, Coop. And I don't want to steal too much of the basketball thunder here. I'll say my piece and let it go.
Go.
I just think that if you don't know, this county has had a lot of success, especially in girls basketball, but the boys programs as of late have really done some great things. I know Sequoia's made a couple of deep runs. Certainly, Etowah has made a couple of deep runs and have put a couple of players in major college basketball. Cherokee had made a run to the finals. On the boys' side, we mentioned River Ridge girls winning a state title. So there's a lot of good basketball. Woodstock girls a few years back played in a state title game. I know I'm going to forget somebody.
Sequoia girls went to the Final Four 2 years ago.
They played in the finals 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah. River Ridge was probably I think 2 or 3 points away from upsetting a Kell team that had a young man by the name of Scoot Henderson who after that season forfeited his senior year and went over to the Overtime Elite League and probably playing in the G League or the NBA at some point. So a lot of talented players and coaches in Cherokee County, and we're looking forward to cover that.
Absolutely. So make sure you stay tuned with us. But as we are still in October, it is still squarely in high school football season.
Yes,
so
it is.
We will continue with that. And as we always do, we'll start in alphabetical order with the Cherokee Warriors, who are at 1-7 on the year. A tough loss against Walton. This game was kind of what we expected in a lot of ways. You kind of hate to say that. But look, Walton was ranked 14th, I think, nationally in this last weekend's ratings. So, losing to Walton by 41 is not the worst thing in the world. Now, you don't take moral victories out of that, but you got to just put that in your mind where that actually is. Things don't get much easier moving into this week against North Cobb. North Cobb's lost 3 games. They've lost to Westlake, Buford, and Walton by 8. So all of those losses coming against the upper echelon of 7A schools. Going to be tough sledding once again. This game will be at North Cobb. But focusing back on the Walton game, Tanner Savasier was the driver of the offense, as we've talked about a lot this year. 229 total yards combined with passing and rushing, and then their score was because of him running the ball for a touchdown. So all in all, the streak continues for the Warriors in that sense, where you look at this team, and from here on out, playoffs are almost out of the picture for them. Now, if they beat North Cobb and they beat Kennesaw Mountain, there's a mathematical possibility that they could, but they need help at this point as well.
Yeah, they do need help. But I think whether or not the playoffs are in play, I think one of the things that this senior class for Cherokee wants to do is go out 2 additional wins to go to 3-7 will be great, but they're going to compete and they're going to battle. I don't think any of these kids have quit. I don't think this is probably, if they had to go back and say this is how our season's going to go, I don't think they would have seen that. And I'm gonna say this again. I think if those 2 county games, the Sequoia game and the Etowah game, go differently, I think this might be a different season. But be though as it may, here they are. They sit at 1-7, trying to close out the season against 2 of their last 3 games are against certainly 2 of the top teams in the state of Georgia, and as you mentioned, 1 top nationally in the Walton Raiders, and they fell to Walton last week, as you mentioned, 49-7. The bugaboo again, or the challenge for Cherokee this week is can they sustain drives, right? Can they get a running game established? And we sound like a broken record when we say that.
Well, you may have heard this a time or two.
But I think that you can't get away from it. While you will graduate some seniors, your backfield comes back next year, and these guys, they have to find a way to establish. I'm not saying we're going to throw everything away and play for next season, but there's no better time like the present for guys like Jared Jones and Christian Irwin to get that ground game established. I mean, we've seen it, but it's been in fits and starts, and they're going to have to find a way to not just that, but to convert. I think that's another thing that that Cherokee, I feel like, has had some issue converting those drives into points. I think we could say the same thing about Woodstock and some of the games that we've witnessed with them, where sometimes they move the ball in between the 30s and then get down inside close to the red zone and drive stall, and I think those things have become momentum killers. So, Cherokee's got a tough road to hoe. There's no doubt about it. North Cobb, their quarterback Nick Grimstead is pretty darn good. David Eziamume, he's kind of an athlete back there, an amazing running back. I don't even know if he played against Kennesaw Mountain last week, but they've got another wide receiver, Zion Bryan, not the fastest guy, but a big target at 6'6", 185. So they're going to create some matchup problems for Cherokee. And again, I think the Warriors, they've got some reliable receivers. Wyatt Tash has been so good for Cherokee, and Grayson Sexton's been good, and we know Jace Jones is back. But they're going to have somebody else, probably try to find a way to the end zone, whether that's Pops Jameson, again, the 3 receivers we mentioned. Malachi Eccles has seen some action at some point, but they're going to have to find a way to put points on the board and then, make this game kind of like maybe a slugfest, kind of a lower scoring affair. But North Cobb's been so strong this season. again, with Eziamume, I don't know how you slow that down.
Well, they are only 1-3 at home. Now, their 3 losses came to Westlake, Buford, and Walton. All 3 of those games were at North Cobb. Okay.
So what you're saying is Emory Sewell Stadium is not an imposing place to play? Is that what you're telling me?
Well, no, I'm just saying that their 1-3 record at home may be more because of who they played.
Okay.
More than it is the home and away split,
Sure.
Because, again, they beat Marietta at Marietta. They beat Northside Warner Robins at Northside. They beat Milton at Milton. And they beat Wheeler at Wheeler. Their one loss came last week against Kennesaw Mountain, where they did play again at North Cobb. So just throwing that out there.
And this is what I would say about North Cobb, and then I'll say this was the last thing. One of the things that shocked me about them was the way that they beat Milton. They were just very physical with them. And I don't know. I felt like Milton was probably a better team than Westlake, but they just came out and dominated Milton. I wasn't at the game. I had some friends there kind of keeping me in the loop on what was going on there, but I was a little bit shocked by that result. So, again, this is a team maybe got off to a slow start, have kind of found their way, and I would say that Cherokee's probably catching them at a bad time.
Yeah, 42-27 was that win over Milton, just to put an emphasis on that. So it wasn't even a close game. It was pretty dominating. I have Cherokee at number 4 in my power ranking.
Likewise.
All right. Moving on, we will skip Creekview again, our game of the week, Creekview and Rome. So we'll talk about Creekview at the end. We'll have Coach Williams on in a few minutes. Make sure you stay tuned for that. But let's talk about the Etowah Eagles, 4-4 on the season. You and I went over to Cobb Buccaneer EMC Stadium at Gary Varner Field. We'll never go back.
Never.
Nothing personal with Allatoona. Everybody's been great. Nobody's mean to us. But you and I, it's either us or it's that place or it's our combination thereof. We do not do anything for our Cherokee County teams when we're there.
Allatoona has outscored Cherokee County team in games that we broadcast from Cobb EMC Field at Cobb EMC Stadium at Gary Varner Field. Allatoona is now outscored Cherokee County 65-0 in those games.
It's only 2. By the way.
Oh, yeah.
But, yeah.
And it also...
From a technical point.
We've had the worst technical difficulties over there. And nothing to do with their facilities, I don't think. It's just...
Again, it's weird.
There's a gremlin in the system for us when we go over there.
You went and saw Woodstock and Creekview play on Thursday, and you said it was weird.
Yeah.
It's kind of how I would describe us at Allatoona. Like, it's not weird to be there, but when you and I are there, weird things happen.
Yeah, it's like Friday the 13th all over again.
Yeah, except on October 20th.
Exactly.
So,
exactly.
But either way, we're not planning on going back unless something crazy happens. But again, nothing personal with Allatoona. But credit to Allatoona, big win for them, 34-0. I think for us, we were very excited. Jack Strickland returned. Looked great, by the way. Was able to put a lot of zip on the ball. Didn't have any issues gripping the ball again. He broke his hand earlier. That was the injury. Able to return. This was a huge game for Etowah because we're talking about playoff seedings down the road. They're not eliminated yet. We'll talk about their path to the playoffs here in a moment. Obviously, our player of the week, Mason Mancini, over 125 yards on 6 grabs, I think. He just kept going up on the sideline, and smartly Strickland kept looking his way and just kept hitting him there in the first half for a lot of yards and a lot of success. The frustrating thing for Etowah was the lack of consistency. We knew that they were without some pieces on the offense, obviously without Xavier Mahoney, without Reese Weir. And then on the offensive line, they've plugged some guys in there where they can fit them in. And it started to show in the running game a little bit. There wasn't a ton there. And then trying to pass it downfield, it worked about 50% of the time. But when you run for 2 yards on first down, it's 2nd and 8, you throw it deep. That one doesn't work. 3rd and 8. Something happens. There was a lot going on there. So Etowah was never really able to punch it in. They got into the red zone a couple times and got stopped a couple times. And then, after you don't make it on 4th and goal once, it's hard to kick the field goal the second time and the third time. So they were caught chasing the point thereafter, which I agreed with the play call, by the way. I would have done the same thing. All in all, again, odd game. It was fun to see Etowah come back out in their traditional offense, but at the same time, obviously not the result they wanted. So credit to Allatoona and especially Sadiq Teal, who, we kind of sat here on the podcast before we went over and we're like, he's not completing 50% of his passes. And, this team's only averaging about, 100 rushing yards per game. And, he got that on one run, had a 99-yard touchdown run on just a quarterback sneak, just trying to get out of the end zone, give him some room to operate, and broke it for a touchdown. So impressive win for Allatoona. They put themselves back in the playoff conversation as well, with their wins over Woodstock and Etowah. They're actually in the catbird seat when they play River Ridge. Depending on what happens with River Ridge and Etowah, they could be the 4th seed, which you and I, if we would have said that 3 weeks ago, we would have said there's no way.
Yeah, we'll get to that in a minute.
Okay.
We'll talk about Allatoona in a minute. I want to talk about Etowah here. And again, you mentioned Jack Strickland. It was great to see Jack back in action. And it was almost like, and I don't want to say it was Mahoney. I think some of that was just getting Jack kind of used to contact as well. He throws a really pretty ball. We know he's a baseball player also, and did a good job out there. I just think, like as you mentioned, once you got inside the red zone, Allatoona just really kind of buckled in and got really stingy down there. Not the result you want in that game. I think for Allatoona, just in that game in particular, it was a little bit emotional. It was senior night. It was these guys last night out. They really hadn't played well all season. Let's be honest. As you mentioned, that their quarterback was completing below 50% of his passes, and they came out and played inspired football. Etowah essentially ran into a buzzsaw.
Yeah.
It was almost like Allatoona was ambushed,
waiting for them.
Yeah, they kind of ambushed Etowah, and certainly not the result that we had thought. I thought this game, I thought Allatoona had a slight edge, and even that was going in before the game, before we knew that Jack was playing. I thought that would certainly that would swing momentum differently. But Allatoona looked very similar to the team we saw last year, and Etowah drops their 4th consecutive region game. Coop, you did mention they're not completely out of it here, but they're going to host another team from Woodstock, as the River Ridge Knights will come to town, and it's do or die for them. And I hate to sound so dramatic here, but in terms of your playoff seedings, it's a game that they have to have.
Yeah, they do, and even with that, they really need some help because they're going to have to play Rome, and that still only puts them at 2 wins.
Right.
And you're comparing that to the fact that all you would need to get jumped in that sense is Allatoona still already has 2 wins. And Allatoona is going to play Sequoia this week, which we'll talk about that game in a minute. And then they play River Ridge to finish it out. And, circular logic there would tell you that they could win one of those 2 if they do beat Etowah, or with their win over Etowah, I should say.
Right.
So, yeah, look, Etowah needs some help. But I think the biggest thing for Etowah is this week they're going to play River Ridge. They shouldn't need much motivation to get ready to play River Ridge. This is actually one of those, I think Etowah might feel like the most targeted when River Ridge became good in 2020, kind of that leap year for River Ridge that we talked about, where they got over the little brother syndrome because they played Etowah in the out-of-region schedule. This was back in the days of when Etowah and Woodstock and Cherokee were 7A. Well, they would all schedule each other, and Etowah was the first team that River Ridge would play in the county, and they beat them twice in a row, and Etowah was not happy about it. And they didn't realize what River Ridge was going to be in 2020, but the feeling from that Etowah crowd was, I can't believe we just lost to these guys again.
Right.
So I think that there's an element where, now none of these guys were probably on that team in 2020. They, were freshmen or even 8th graders at that point. Is that right?
Yeah, I don't think any of these I don't think there are any players left on that 2020 River Ridge team. The last ones graduated last year, yeah.
But, hatred is learned, and it's passed down typically through high schools.
Yeah.
Right? Generational trauma. And Etowah might have some of that against River Ridge. So I feel like there's no love lost. Obviously this game last year broke the way of River Ridge. It will be at Eagle Mountain, so that probably benefits Etowah in some regard. I think it's their final home game, if I'm not mistaken. I think they have to go to Rome after this.
Yeah, I believe so.
So, hopefully for Etowah, they can get to 500 up above that. They win this game, and then they, if they lose to Rome, which the predictors would tell you is what happens, but we'll see. Anything can happen, especially depending on what Creekview does with Rome. Seeing them get to 500 would be great, and then seeing them climb over that would be even better. So again, not eliminated from the playoffs, but the math becomes really difficult. And if you lose to River Ridge this week, you're out.
And again, I think Etowah we talked to Coach Kemper last week. I don't know if I've seen a team more decimated by injury,
seriously.
in a long time. As we were, getting set up, we saw Draven Cole over there on the sideline in a knee brace, and I was like, "Are you kidding me?" Or, we were wondering why we don't get an injury report, which is fine; it doesn't matter. But we're just kind of looking at the guys that weren't able to go, and it's just. I mean, it's a mass unit for some of them, and it's tough when you've got. And we're not talking about your scout team guys. These are guys that were contributing. We know about the Buffalo, and we know about Mahoney, and we talked about Strickland. But even one of your defensive linebackers in that scheme, was it extremely important a season ago and you just hate to see that, especially for these seniors. Man, this is their last go round, and injuries are a part of the game. No, Coach Kemper's not making excuses at all. It's just frustrating, I think, from a coaching perspective and even from a fan perspective. Like, how many more times can somebody go down with an injury?
Well, I mean, that's the thing. Even we're watching the game, and you're getting the stats on the two deep, and Gabe Kuvas, who filled in for Jason Pertz-Moy, he gets hurt in the game, and then Jason Pertz-Moy gets back in the game, and you wonder how 100% he. It's just like you just feel for this Etowah team, just because anytime they make a step forward, and you think we got some depth, there goes a guy out, and I mean, it's frustrating. I know it's frustrating for them, and not that we root for any team in particular. But when they do go play a team like Allatoona, you're hoping that Etowah can bring home a victory, and it's tough.
Yeah, it is tough, and they have their work cut out for them this week, Coop.
They do. River Ridge is going to be a tough opponent. We'll talk about River Ridge as an opponent in a little bit, but I think the key to success for Etowah is establishing the run game. Now, that's a lot easier said than done. River Ridge has done a pretty good job at forcing teams into passing situations, and I think the hardest thing is, you're going to have to score to keep up with River Ridge in a certain extent. I don't know that you're going to be able to limit River Ridge enough. We saw that even the upper echelon of defenses in Creekview and Sequoia allowed a pretty sizable point differential, and even if you're up by River Ridge early, in the end of that first quarter, River Ridge does not give up.
No, they don't fight. They don't quit. That's for sure.
So you're going to have to, if you do beat them, it's by putting them in the ground and watching the grave overnight.
Yeah, you're going to have to really bury them.
Yeah, because they will come back.
Yeah, Coop, I think one of the things that should be exciting is both of these quarterbacks have live arms and can have some receivers that can go up and get the football. So I think if you're looking for a game with exciting plays, this will be a good one to take in. If you were on the fence as an Etowah Eagle fan to come out and support your guys, I think that's you absolutely should be out there. And likewise for River Ridge. I mean, I think that'll be an exciting game. But in any event, we'll talk about the Knights here momentarily.
Yeah, before we move on, I do want to give Etowah a specific defensive player a shout-out. Kane Moss was a guy that I believe he's only a sophomore. He was a guy that we talked about a lot. He's in that pony position in that Coach Smith-led defense, which if you're not familiar, in that 3-3 stack, whatever you want to call it. The pony's basically a hybrid safety, linebacker, corner. They kind of move all over the place. Kane Moss, he's going to be back hopefully for the next couple years at Etowah. He looks really good, and he made a lot of big plays against Allatoona. So I know the score didn't turn out the way they wanted to, but there were a handful of times when we called his name on Friday night, and I thought he made some really big open field tackles. I thought he did a good job when he was assigned with some pass defense and just down the list. I thought he did a great job all around. So wanted to make that point. Etowah, I have at number 5 in the power ranking.
I've got the Eagles at number 6 in my power ranking.
Well, let's talk about their opponent coming up on Friday. River Ridge, again, in the year 3-5 now. They lost to Rome. So if you're a River Ridge fan, you're kind of sitting there like, I can't believe we've lost 3 in a row, but you've played the top 3 teams in the region. So you got to take that with a grain of salt and say, okay, we lost to Sequoia by 7, who's locked in the playoffs, most likely the 2 seed. And then we lost to Creekview by 14 at Creekview, which they do historically well there. They're going to be most likely the 3 seed with the potential for a region title. We talked about that. And then you lost to Rome last week 55-0, which, again, you lose to Rome. That does nothing for me. Everybody loses to Rome, so whatever. I think the biggest thing for River Ridge, they only had 85 yards against Rome. That's a tough metric. The defense did a great job on Rome's part. Again, we'll get to talk to Coach Reid here in a little bit and ask him some about that defense. For River Ridge, it's got to be a short turnaround. I'll tell you this. watching the highlight clip, we got tagged in Revis McLaren's highlights from that game. I thought he did a fantastic job against some receivers that will be playing at the next level. So he's a guy that, we've talked about him and Andrew Hand a good bit. Felt like that secondary was one of the best in River Ridge and in the county, and I still think that was proven true even in that game. So tough break for River Ridge, but the hardest part is behind you, and now it's crucial if River Ridge wants to get into the playoffs, which I would say they're the favorite to get into that 4th seed at this point. You're going to play at Etowah, and then you get to host Allatoona. So you got to win both those games, and if you do that, you're a lock to get in.
Completely agree, Coop. They do have their work cut out for them. I think this is a River Ridge team that hopefully, as you mentioned, can put those 3 straight losses behind them in region play. You can't let a team like Rome beat you twice. I could see maybe an emotional letdown against Creekview. They'll have Camden Cox back. That's my understanding. So they'll have their running back back. They've got their 3 receivers, the 3 top receivers, Hollier, Vincent, and Thompson. I think they're probably a team with less injuries than Etowah, and I think that gives them an advantage even on the road. Defensively, for what I need to see from River Ridge, we know the back end looks pretty good. Can those linebackers get pressure on Etowah's quarterback Strickland? One of the things, Strickland is not as mobile as Mahoney. I think that just comes with the territory. I think if he has time to sit back there and pick you apart, he will. If he's got to scramble out of the pocket, I don't know how much more accurate he is, unless that's the design rollout. And maybe that's something Etowah will do to roll, maybe get to help protection, maybe roll him out of the pocket. But I think River Ridge's success hinges on their ability to make Strickland uncomfortable. Take away the run. Etowah struggled a little bit with the run. Walker Hughes done he's filled in nicely, but he's just not where Reese Weir was. You're talking about a freshman versus a senior. He's got a little bit more growing to do, but we think he's going to be a fine running back over the next couple of years for the Eagles. But River Ridge, the Burdettes, the Tomlinsons, the Walker Hughes guy, those kind of guys really need to get after Etowah's quarterback. I think they'll probably have a little bit easier time this week with Etowah versus with Rome. I think the other thing, and this is no disrespect to Etowah, the team speed is a little bit different between Rome and Etowah. So I think River Ridge probably matches up better player with regards to personnel with Etowah. So River Ridge not completely out of it. They've got to. I wouldn't even say they don't have to back into the playoffs. They have to go in and kick the door down. You mentioned they've got to win 2 games. And if you had told me 3 weeks ago that River Ridge, all they have to do is beat Etowah, I would say that's questionable.
Right.
And then Allatoona, I'd be like, that's no brainer. And now I think the script is flipped a little bit. And this is not a. I'm looking at this Etowah team. I'm like, they're not going to lay down and let River Ridge beat them. So I think River Ridge is going to have to go on the road and take a game. And then, then next week we'll talk about this. You've got to beat an Allatoona team that looks like Allatoona we've come to know.
Yeah. I mean, Allatoona looked vintage Allatoona there.
Right.
Looked like Gary Varner never left.
Right.
But, yeah, I mean, I think for River Ridge, the key is to not get ahead of yourself because I think it will be fairly easy to overlook this Etowah team, especially considering what we just said because, that's going to be the conversation with the coaching staff. We just got done playing Sequoia and Creekview and Rome. Now that that's out of the way, let's get into these teams that we can beat. But you have to be careful with that because Etowah is still dangerous, and they're getting pieces back. Now, not all of them, again, most of these guys are not going to be back, but the pieces they are getting back slowly but surely will rack up. And I think the other thing, too, is that timing gets down a little bit better. And Strickland does provide them some experience, obviously being a senior and having played last year. But he also provides them with the explosive ability to beat them downfield. And we know that Mason Mancini had a big game, leading receiver for Etowah, but they go 4 deep at wide receiver just like River Ridge does. So it's not going to be simple. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be up to this group to really pin their ears back and keep them focused. But I don't think River Ridge can. River Ridge can't afford to look over Etowah and say, well, we just got to beat Allatoona moving forward because Etowah is still going to be dangerous, and this is a game that I think Etowah is circling on their calendar right now and saying this is a game that we need to win right here, and wounded animal mode's never a great place to be.
No, it's not, Coop. I think the Knights probably have a little bit more because of their ability to run the football. I think they're probably favored in this game, in my opinion. I have them checking in at number 3 in my power ranking this week.
Yeah, I have them number 3 as well.
And before I'd be remiss, 2 of the better offensive linemen in the county won't be going head-to-head, but they'll be on display on Friday night, and Tate Nelms and John Fletcher.
Yeah, 2 guys that we've called since 2015.
Yeah,
feels
forever.
like.
Yeah,
12-year starters. Look, we're going to miss both these guys in a big way. Great families, very supportive of Cherokee County and, big names around here. And,
absolutely.
We're going to miss both those guys, and they'll both be playing college ball somewhere, probably in the Division I, Division II area. They're not hurting for offers right now. So both those guys doing well. I think Tate even took a trip to Georgia Tech. I know for sure. And then John Fletcher's been getting some love from Kennesaw State and some other programs. So, maybe they stay local.
Sure.
Who knows? Either way, all of that being said, I agree with you, number 3 in the power ranking. So that'll move on to Sequoia, who's coming off of a bye week, very well-earned bye week. You got to feel like that bye week was a pretty happy one, pulling out the Battle of Hickory Flat and handling their business against Creekview. You know that they're happy at that. Sit at 5-3. Again, they've faced the tough part of their schedule, all things considered. They're going to get to play Allatoona this week. Allatoona has to come to Skip Pope, and then they're going to turn around and they're going to face Woodstock to close out the season. So that'll be the wrap-up on their final 2 games. Very simple for Sequoia. Win the 2 games, and you're in. You get a home playoff game. Now, mathematically speaking, if Creekview beats Rome by 57 points or more, then there would be dispute with that. But
is there any team in the state that could beat Rome by 57 points, Coop?
University of Georgia, maybe.
I meant high school team. Right.
Oh, I would say Georgia Tech, but they couldn't.
Wow. Ouch.
Sorry, fellas.
Man. Little hate for the North Avenue Trade School.
It's not hate. I wish Georgia Tech was better. But, come on. Can't deny what that is. Either way, that's totally off topic. But, yeah, probably Georgia. But in high school football, no. But, yeah, because of the tiebreakers, again, thank you to Coach Teeter for sending that over to us. We actually know the tiebreaker now. We got to look at it. It's point differentials, all things considered. And, unfortunately for Sequoia, or maybe fortunately at this point, because it pretty much locks them into that home playoff game, losing to Rome by such a wide margin makes it where when you compare them all, and again, Team A plays Team B and Team C beats, the scenario. Trust me on this one. We did the math. They have to beat them by 57 points. So it pretty much locks Sequoia into the 2. Creekview can also, Sequoia could lose a game and Creekview could jump them. But again, that's all stuff that would have to happen down the road. So all things considered, Sequoia at 2. They're going to get to play Allatoona. We talked about Allatoona a little bit earlier. Different Allatoona team than when they started, okay? This is a team that went from losing to Cartersville 37-0 and losing to, Creekview by 24, losing to Hillgrove by 17. I think that was the game where you and I kind of looked at each other and were like, okay, Allatoona is beatable this year. Well, they've rattled off 2 wins. Now, again, they beat Woodstock by 3, Etowah by 34. What does that really mean? We don't know, but I will say this. When we saw them on Friday in person, they passed the eye test. They look ready to play ball. So Sequoia better be ready off of this bye week, because one thing that Allatoona does well is they run the ball. And Sequoia, that's their strength on defense. They're going to have to find a way to do that. And I think for Sequoia, the other key is to score relatively effectively. Now, we saw them do that well against Creekview, and they've done it well at times. I'd like to see some consistency on offense going into this game, and that would make you feel a lot better moving towards that. So that's kind of my breakdown of the game, I think.
For Sequoia, the bye week comes at a great time. You're riding high. I would say if there was a younger coach or less experienced coach coaching them, I would say, man, he's got to guard against complacency. Against an Allatoona team that you would thought was extremely beatable, and you're coming off of a high, but they've had the bye week. I think when you have guys like Coach Teeter, Coach Buddy on staff, I think they can rein those young men in and get them refocused. This is what I see in this football game. You have 2 teams that know what their identity is, and I think they're not going to go outside of that identity. Whether Allatoona won that game last week or not, they did exactly what they came in there to do. Xavier Rucker was going to run the ball hard in between in between the tackles, and they were going to line up and try to be physical with you.
Yeah.
You get some of that with Sequoia. Sequoia is not going to try to throw the ball 40 times for balls in the air, deeper than 15, 20 yards. That's just not their game plan. They understand their identity, and they have, for the most part this season, both these ball clubs have been able to execute their game plan. And I would say that win, lose, or draw, they just understand their identity. And I think that's what makes this game interesting. Can Allatoona have success running against Sequoia's front seven? Will Allatoona's, I would say, inspired defensive line be able to slow down Ian Mariah, Will Rejecki? Can they get pressure on Colby Martin, force him into some mistakes? I think that's the game within the game. I don't know how much of a home field advantage Skip Pope is, and I don't know how well Allatoona travels. There was a great crowd out there at Allatoona for senior night. And again, Sadiq Teal looked like a completely different player. I mean, the young man completed 72% of his passes, had 3 touchdown passes, and one of the passes he dropped in. I think we say this about great passes. He dropped it right over the shoulder of his receiver. The receiver had been interfered with. He catches it over the shoulder as he's running toward the pylon. There's no other place that you want that ball, and Sadiq Teal dropped it in on a dime. And there were a couple passes he had where we're just like, where has this kid been? And like we said last week, I think there are 2 tales of Sadiq Teal. There's one where he looks really good, and then there's one where he looks, like he just showed up at football. And last week, he looked really, really good.
Yeah, it's not an arm talent problem. I think it's more of an understanding of what the defense is doing to you to counter what, in diagnosing that in the correct amount of time as well, because I think he's forced into some bad throws as well. To answer your question about the home and away split for Allatoona, they are 1-3 on the road. Now, there's a huge discrepancy with the talent level that they played. So they lost to North Paulding by 11. They lost to Cartersville by 37. Now, they lost to Hillgrove by 17. That game, to me, is still, when you look at what happened in their schedule, it's like, how? How did that happen?
Sure.
Because Hillgrove's not, a great team.
Sure.
I mean, I hate to say that, but they're really not.
They're struggling a little bit.
They are, and they lost to River Ridge and lost to Creekview. Obviously, they played River Ridge close, but that was the first game of the year. You kind of chalk that up to whatever.
Yeah, feeling everybody out.
Right. And then they did beat Woodstock, but by 3. So where does that really put them in the grand scheme of everything? You don't really know at the end of the day. So not necessarily a great road team, but at the end of the day, a lot like what we talked about with North Cobb. They're also 1-3 on the road, but is that more of a case of who they played, or is it more of a case of them actually being on the road versus at home? I don't think it's really that. I think it's just the competition level. So I think Sequoia will be favored in this one. I think it's probably 10, 17 points. But Sequoia better be ready, because this is to me, you talk about trap games with Creekview and Woodstock last week. This right here is a trap game for Sequoia.
If it was played on a Thursday night or an off night, I would completely agree. I just don't think.
I think especially
after
the
bye,
too.
Yeah, being at home after the bye, I think the only thing that would concern me is maybe after the bye if they're a little rusty in the first quarter. And they can't get behind by 14 points.
And you also don't want them to get the sense that you get that relief syndrome and say, okay, we did it.
Right.
And that's, we beat Creekview.
So
and
now
it's Yeah, you kind of take that deep breath, and you don't want that to happen.
Right.
You want them to stay
locked
in.
This is the same scenario that Allatoona was in last
Literally
season.
the exact same.
I mean, maybe they had a couple more wins, I think, overall.
They had beaten Kell. And they had beaten Hillgrove, and they played Cartersville to a 3-point loss. That game was in overtime, as a matter of fact. So we kind of felt like Allatoona was really good. And then they, lost to Creekview on a last-second field goal, and then they got dog-walked by Rome, just like everybody did. And then, they beat Woodstock and they beat Etowah. And we were kind of sitting there at this exact same point with Sequoia and Allatoona, and we were saying this is strength on strength. Allatoona I formation, Sequoia wing T. This is going to be old-style football. Allatoona comes out on top, and then they obviously go to River Ridge, River Ridge goes to Allatoona. Again, we were there for that game, and it did not go well by any stretch of the imagination for anyone involved, and it was tough. So Allatoona in a very similar spot. You just hope that they're not the same team that they were last year and that these 2 last games for them will not be wins, they'll be losses.
I think the big key for Sequoia in the pass defense, you got to watch out for Camden Phillips and then Aiden Gilbo. Like, not a ton of receptions, but timely receptions is really what was able to help sustain some drives. And then again, I think Xavier Rucker is going to be a very good running back at some point. He's just a sophomore. He leads a team in rushing. I think he's just on the cusp of becoming a star in Cobb County. And hopefully for our sake, we don't have to see him again when they do the region realignments, because a young man runs hard. And it maybe not the best Allatoona offensive line that they've had at that school, but they do just enough to get to spring Rucker free. And again, if this is a slugfest, Allatoona can stick around, maybe 10-7 going into the fourth quarter. I'm holding my breath, because Allatoona is similarly built like Sequoia. They'll just run the ball down, and they're not running out of the eye. It'll be out of the shotgun, but they'll take as much time as they need. And Teal, you mentioned his 99-yard touchdown run. It's for as fast as he is. I'm shocked they don't have any more design runs for him, because I think he can really cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, kickoff for that game will be at 7:30. Halftime will be at 8 o'clock. Game will be over at 8:30.
Man, kind of my kind of game, man. It's right in time for my bedtime.
Oh, goodness. I have Sequoia number 1 in the power ranking.
They are my number 1 team in Cherokee County.
Matter of fact, they'll compete for the county title when
next
they play
week.
Woodstock next week.
Right.
So still in line for that for the
a share
2 years
of the
in a row.
county title, because at that point, even if they lost at Woodstock, they would have a share, and then they would outright win it.
I would have to do the math.
Yeah,
because I don't know who would be second in line for that.
Well, Creekview would be the only other team in the county. They only with 1 loss, so in county games. Now Cherokee,
true.
they didn't play Cherokee in the regular season, so that's not And Cherokee didn't play River Ridge, so it's not official, but official enough.
Good enough for us.
Yes.
We'll get that right when we get there. Speaking of the Woodstock Wolverines, they are our topic here. 2-7 on the year. Again, great win over Etowah last couple weeks, so people were still excited about that. You were there for this Creekview Woodstock game that, for all accounts, not just you saying this, it was odd. It was an odd atmosphere there.
I know we're going to talk about Creekview in a minute.
Yeah.
And I realize Woodstock is in a rebuilding year.
Yeah.
It's a Thursday night, so I understand that's off. Students are still maybe studying for a test. I don't know what kind of teacher would give a test on a Friday.
That's usually when we had our tests.
Really?
Yeah.
I'd much rather have it on a Monday.
End of the week. That way you could go to the sporting event.
Not have to study over the weekend. I also went to a college prep high school. We were really weird, nerdy, dorky. Had to do homework over the weekends. It sucked. Yeah. Back in my day, right?
I didn't do a lot of homework.
Okay. Let me get back to
Yeah, anyway.
The vibe, it was just very odd. It was a very odd vibe, and I don't know what, I think maybe you do constitute that to an off night on a Thursday night, but also both of these teams are coming off emotional ball games where Woodstock in one side comes off an emotional win over Etowah. Creekview comes off of an emotional loss that they've got to put it behind them. And I just think we see that in sports a lot, where you have, if Alabama, they have a big game, college, I'll just use college as an example, where, they'll play LSU next week, and I'm sure both of those teams will be up for that. And I believe the week after, is it UTC or is it Kentucky?
Kentucky after, and then Chattanooga.
All right. So anyway, you maybe have this big game against LSU and everybody's hype and it's great, and then you have to go to Kentucky and it's like, well, they're not playing very well, so we can just roll over them, or you lose a game and you have a hangover, like, I can't believe we lost this game, and that carries over.
Right.
And I think you just see, especially high school, college sports more so than anything than the pros. I felt like that was it. Like Woodstock probably had a little bit of a hangover from that victory. Creekview, a little bit of a hangover, and just a slow start. Woodstock was in the ball game at half. It's 7-3 at halftime, and I know you and I were going back and forth on text, and I was like, "It's happening, man. This is this is." I said, and I thought to myself, if Woodstock punches, they missed on a fake field goal. They were kept out of the end zone a couple of times. I was thinking to myself, if Woodstock is able to convert at halftime to make it a 7-6 game or 10-7 and go up, I think that might be a completely different game. Nonetheless, they weren't able to cash in on a couple of opportunities. And this is a team, the scores probably wasn't indicative of their growth. They lose that game 35-3, but Coop, they're in it at halftime, and they're a broken tackle away, a missed assignment away. They're close, but the things that are not able to do end up compounding, and then the other team is able to do. Like when you can't do, when someone can do, it almost exacerbates the problem, and it snowballed in the third quarter. Got out of hand a little bit. A couple of big punt returns for Creekview that put them deep in Woodstock territory. But I thought their secondary played all right. It picked off, I believe, one pass, recovered a fumble.
And 3 forced turnovers.
Yeah, and so they're not, they're close. And I thought as a standout to me, Luke Renninger, I thought looked really good as a receiver, and Chase Kalina also tough to keep up with, and they don't if you don't get pressure on Lynch, I think he's a kid that gosh, I wish he had one more year.
I know
to be with this group. I wish these seniors had one more year because I think they've grown in leaps and bounds this season, and to get to that 2-7 mark, I think is fantastic for them. Like you mentioned, they'll have the week off before they close out the season against Sequoia, and I don't believe is there mathematically a way that Woodstock?
Yeah,
are they still mathematically in this thing?
So they would need a lot of things to happen because they have to thread the needle now because they have the head-to-head over Etowah, but they don't have the head-to-head over River Ridge nor Allatoona. So when you're talking about that 4-team race for that last spot, what you would really need is you would need Etowah to win out. You would have to win out because you only have one region win. That would put Etowah at 2 region wins. That would put you at 2 region wins. You would need River Ridge to lose against Etowah, and you would need them to beat Allatoona, and that would keep them at 2 region wins because they would have the head-to-head over you. And then you would need Allatoona, who is now at 2 region wins, to lose out. And if all of that happened, you could thread that needle depending on how much.
Yeah, point differential.
Right, the point differential would come into play again.
So we're talking about low probability.
Like a 0.01% chance of that happening, but it is possible.
Okay.
So you can do the math on your bye week. Because there's a lot that has to happen there, and you'll know pretty quickly, by watching the games on Friday, what will happen.
Sure.
I guess if you are a Woodstock fan, you are rooting for Etowah, and you're rooting for Sequoia.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you really want the upper echelon of teams to stay the upper echelon of teams because you're not trying to compete for the 3rd seed or the 2nd seed or whatever. But now at this point, going to face Sequoia at the end. That could be a game that you try and trap them into if you want to. I think for Woodstock, the thing you have to realize is the job that Coach Devine has done in this first year has been outstanding. One of the big points that I hear a lot of coaches talk about, and I think it's true, is the team that you get in Week 10 should be better than the team you have in Week 1. And the growth over a season is crucial. And I think Woodstock's a prime example of that. I think this Woodstock sitting here at Week 9, Week 10 of this season would beat Week 1 Woodstock by 21, 24 points. So the amount of growth that they've made over the year has been super beneficial to them, and I think it'll benefit them in the long run. But I think more importantly than that, Woodstock fans can look up there and say we won a couple games, and those wins in the win column are important. We were talking about that Cambridge scrimmage. You and I, way back at the beginning of August, you and I went and watched them play Cambridge, and we talked about, was that an important win for them, yes or no? And absolutely it was. Even though it didn't go in the win column, fans got to leave that stadium and say Woodstock won a football game, and that was the first time they were able to do that in 2 years. Well, then they were able to do it against Lassiter, and then they were able to say it when they beat a region opponent in Etowah. So they've been able to mark off a lot of checks. Home win, road win, and now a region win. I think for them, that's a great season that they could ask for in year 1. Excited to see what happens as they move forward. But again, not done at all. They're going to play Sequoia to wrap things up after this bye week, and they could really mess some things up for some teams.
Yes, they certainly could. They certainly could. And again, I've got Woodstock ranked at number 5 in my power ranking this week. Close. I think they're close, and again, as Coach Devine continues to have an opportunity to work with these young men, I think they win a couple more games next season, and we might, depending on how the region, what the regions look like, we don't know what that looks like, but depending on who you get matched up with, you might have an opportunity to put on a couple more region wins in that, and again, as Coach Devine said going into last week, they were still in the conversation.
Yeah,
and technically
they are.
Again, I'm going to go with my probability and say they're going to need, to beat Sequoia and then have an act of Congress happen. They're dependent on it's the things that they need to happen are beyond their control, and and there's a lot of those things that have to happen. So you're really, again, that's tough.
Yeah, if it does happen, they should buy lottery tickets.
Yes.
Because that's some good odds there. I have been number 6 still. I still think the body of work for Etowah just is a little better. I think that they're Etowah, we talked about the byproduct of injury. Not take anything away from Woodstock. I think one thing that we can say is that if you compared our power rankings at the end of last year, where Sequoia was 1 and, Cherokee was 2, Creekview was 3, River Ridge was 4, Etowah was 5, Woodstock was 6, you can look at the 6 that Woodstock was last year and compare them to the 6 they are this year, and everybody has moved up in that sense. Woodstock would not be number 6 in the power ranking last year. Let me put it like that. They'd probably be 3 or 4, I think. So I think that's an improvement across the board. I think that says a lot about Cherokee County, though.
Yep. I'm not going to argue with you.
All right. Well, let's move into our game of the week. Again, Creekview versus Rome. Join us at Station Head app, stationhead.com. And, of course, you can always find us on northgasportsnetwork.com/live, where you can join us right there as well with the live button. Creekview, look, we talked about it just a second ago. Beat Woodstock. Great win for them. First half did not go the way they wanted it to. A lot of nervous Creekview fans sitting over there at Town Lake. They were able to pull it out in the second half, put it down a little bit. Austin Guest got back to a little bit more sense of normalcy. The first half did not look great for him, but in the second half, he was able to convert some passes, started looking a little better. Special teams was a big factor. Jackson Stanley had the punt return for a touchdown, and then they were able to, set up nice field position as well. Nigel Augamain got back into the end zone. That was a good one for him. So I think it was on another decent run there, 11 yards or so. So depth at the running back position. And I think the biggest thing for Creekview is you had a not great first half, and now in the second half you're able to fix it. So you're able to push off all the negative feelings about the Sequoia game and get right because you got Rome coming up.
Yeah, you do. Coop, I want to take the Creekview fans to task here. I mean, I felt like everybody was sitting on their hands over there at Woodstock, and yeah, I feel like I can say that because I was sitting there. Now I'm at the top of the bleachers, and I'm standing up the entire time, and I'm just kind of observing. I do want to give a shout out to Carson Wood. Now, Carson is one of the leaders of that student section over there, and he was in full force. But I felt like a lot of the students never left northeast Cherokee County to go down to Woodstock. Again, it's a school night. I get it. It was just not the typical Creekview crowd that we're used to seeing, and I felt like just completely. I'm beating a dead horse here.
Remember we used to do student section rankings?
Yeah.
Should we bring that back?
I mean, if what I saw at Creekview was like the student section, like if that was their normal student section, I would say they'd be ranked like number 5 in the county. Like it was awful.
Well, I think an element of the student section is traveling, especially inter-county games. Now I get it if you don't want to go to Rome, but
now, which is odd because they do travel. Like they have traveled, and so even the North Forsyth game, they were rowdy. At least from my reports of that, they have traveled. But in any event, Coop, they did what they had to do in the second half. They did have an early touchdown pass to Michael Roach from Austin Guest to get on the board to start the scoring. You mentioned the punt return, a couple of great punt returns there. For the Grizzlies, one going for a touchdown and the other one setting them up in great field position. I think Nick Vaccaro also getting in the end zone once on a short touchdown pass.
It was Roach, Gibson, and Vaccaro, right?
And Jack Gibson made a great catch on just a tight end kind of just right up the seam and making a great
play.
Yeah, they do. And so in an event, they've got to turn their attention. This is a team, Coop, that is still in contention for a region title. All right, now they need help.
They do.
First things first, they have to beat Rome.
Yep.
Okay. By the way, I'm throwing things out there. Creekview leads the series, all-time series against Rome 3-2. All right,
that's true.
So I'll put that out there. They've got to beat Rome, and then they need some help. They would need Allatoona or Woodstock to beat Sequoia, and by virtue of the tiebreakers, then Creekview would claim the number one spot in the region.
That is accurate.
It would be their second region title in school history, if that happened.
Yeah. Now look, we talked about Woodstock's pass to the playoffs. Not saying that it's as long of a shot for Creekview to pull out the region title, but it is. There's also a scenario in which they beat Rome by 57 points, and they also can get it done that way. So that's also possible.
Yeah, I'm going to go back to my other question I asked earlier in the podcast. Is there any high school football team in the state of Georgia that could beat Rome by 57 points?
No. But my point still stands, just since we're throwing out scenarios there. If you want to know the tiebreakers.
That's part of it. Okay.
Yeah, so look, you're exactly right. I think for Creekview, and we'll talk about this game more in just a moment. We'll have Coach Williams call in here in just a second. I think the key for Creekview is to put the last two games properly in your head, is to put them in the right mentality. And the key to that is understand what Sequoia did and look at where you came up short, which was in the passing game and the consistency there, and look at what you did right, which was the defense. Now, I know Sequoia ended up putting up some decent points, but the defense was able to have fits and starts. And then you look at the Woodstock game and you look at it as a half. Look at the half that you played and say, that's what we can do in a half. We can beat a team by
28 points.
Yeah, right.
In one half, right.
Yeah, so that's what they should be viewing themselves as, and that puts them on scale. If you view that you can put up 28 points and beat a team by 28 points and a half, that puts you in line with Rome. So don't get overclassed. I think the thing about Rome coming to town is they have a little bit of the Georgia-Alabama syndrome, where you look at the side of the helmet before you look at the actual team across the way and say, I don't know that we're going to have a chance here. And you do. You have a chance. And I think that if there is a place in Cherokee County that is hard to play, it's Creekview. And especially when you get later in the season, Coach Saunders always said it at Gilmer, we're hoping that bus ride's nice and long and those seats are comfy. And that's kind of what you're hoping for if you're a Creekview fan. So plenty of opportunity there for the Grizzlies. And you're right, everything in front of them, they need help. But even if they win against Rome and then the rest of it doesn't happen and they're still the third seed, the conversation around what would happen would change so drastically. Because if you can beat Rome, then you having to go to Blessed Trinity or Alpharetta, or Roswell technically I suppose is possible, but really Blessed Trinity or Alpharetta, okay, we just beat Rome.
Right.
And you get the bye week before the playoffs. So we'll talk
Certainly.
to Coach Williams about that in just a second as well.
Yeah, speaking of Coach Williams, Coop, why don't we go ahead and get to him and get his thoughts on his team's performance last week and the upcoming opponent this week.
And joining us once again is the head coach of the Creekview Grizzlies, Coach Trevor Williams. Coach, thank you for being back with us.
Thanks, as always, for having me. I always enjoy talking to you guys.
Absolutely, Coach. We look forward to it as well. Want to ask a little bit about the game on Thursday, but in a different sort of way. With the game that you guys played being on Thursday, you get an extra day moving into this week. How do you use that extra day? Was that something you gave the boys a day off, or was it an extra day for your coaching staff to prepare for Rome, or what have you done with that extra day that you had?
Yeah, we brought them in. We were able to watch film with them in class and weight training and kind of put that one to bed and then start on breaking down Rome and getting a plan together. So it gave us a little extra time. We gave them the day off from practice or anything after school. So it was good to let those guys go and be kids for once. They invest so much time and energy into this thing, and it was good. And we got to let our coaching staff go home and be dad for a while. So it was good to have an extra day on the weekend, but we got an uphill battle to fight on Friday. So that extra day was much needed.
Coach, don't want to spend too much time talking about the past, but you did have a Thursday game, and it almost looked in the first half, like you guys were sleepwalking, and I think you and your coaching staff got them and woke those boys up at halftime, and they came out and responded. But is a Thursday? What is it with the Thursday night game, like kind of an off-cycle game? And I'm not going to say it was your team, but just even in the as sitting in the stands, it just seemed like there was no energy in that stadium on either side. Now, it was kind of a very odd atmosphere. But what is a lesson that your team learned even from that in that ball game?
Yeah, it was definitely a strange energy in the stadium. But, I think Thursday game, coming off an emotional game the week before, we just didn't do a great job as a coaching staff of getting them ready to play. But credit to our defense. They made some stops on a couple turnovers in the first half, kept us in the game. And then offensively, we were able to calm down, reestablish the run game in the second half, and have a really good third quarter and kind of put it away. But, with high school guys, the struggle is consistency, right? The struggle is always just trying to become the best version of you every time out. And obviously we didn't do that in the first half for a number of reasons, but we're able to get it squared away in the second half. So that the response to that was good to see.
Coach, as you guys prepare to face Rome this week upcoming, I want to ask a little bit, not about Rome yet, but kind of Rome is one of those teams that you can use as a measuring stick for playoff teams. They're obviously in the top 10 in a lot of people's 6A ratings, but they line up very similarly to teams that our region will see in the crossover regions moving forward in the playoffs. How do you view this type of game in that sense, more than just the actual individual game, but do you view it as a way to see where you guys are compared to one of the playoff teams that you would have to beat moving forward to get further into the playoffs?
I think the comparison game is always dangerous, right? Because different matchups and different teams present different challenges and personnel and those types of things. I think we always use every game as a measuring stick of, are we continuing to grow and climb that mountain through the season? And obviously, I mean, what a great opponent coming in here on Friday night. Not only are they extremely talented, they're extremely well coached. Coach Reid and his staff do an unbelievable job. And they've got really good players on top of that. So it's a great test for our guys, and I think our guys are looking forward to the challenge. But I think every Friday night's a measuring stick, not necessarily against your opponent, but against the previous version of yourselves, of against yourself the previous time out, and how much improvement you were able to get done in a week.
Coach, we start the season, or when the season starts, I think everyone comes in with great anticipation of things to happen, and it seems like, October, November, playoffs are such a long way away. But as we sit to this evening on this call, the playoffs are right around the corner. I want to ask about your seniors, and depending on what happens on Friday night, you guys, first of all, congratulations. You guys have punched your ticket to the postseason, and depending on what happens Friday night, you might get another home game. But this also might be the last time that these seniors will play at home in the Grizzly Den. If there was something you would want the community to know about this group of seniors this year that they've had thus far, what would that be?
Man, this group is incredibly special, not only as football players, but as young men. I met them. They were in 8th grade when the staff got here, and you knew then that it was a special group. We were able to keep it largely together for 4 years, and I think that's so important when you talk about being successful at the 6A level. You look at teams that have a high number of seniors year in and year out, because those guys, everybody knows the Andrew Rosinskis, the Reid Andersons, the Michael Roaches, but you may not know, the guys behind the scenes, the Griffin James, Beckett Singletons, lesser known names, and even the guys that are out there that are on the 2 deep as backups or even scout team look guys that just mean so much to our program. They add so much value, the people that they are, the leadership in their locker room. I don't think you can undervalue or overvalue what those guys mean to this program and the legacy they're going to leave. But, it goes beyond football. It's the people that they are and the example they set and the standard they set for our program.
Well said, Coach. Very well said. And your seniors will face a big challenge in Rome coming up this week. We've talked about it a little bit, but getting into the game now, what are you going to need to see from your guys in order to pull out a win here, and what are the expectations in this game?
We just got to go execute. And, that's coach speak, but, like I said, Rome is not only extremely talented, they're extremely well coached. You're not going to trick them. You're not going to pull a fast one on them. You've got to go fight tooth and nail, try to get off the field on third down, see if you can slow them down on offense. We were able last year to get some stops early defensively, and you got to find a way to do that. I don't know, you can't completely stop them, but if you can slow them down, and then offensively, can you put drives together? Can you, number one, get the first down of a drive, take some time off the clock and see if you can keep the chains moving and put yourself in position to score on a long drive. But, it's really go out one play at a time, and again, that's coach speak and cliche, but it really, really is. When you play a team that's as talented and well coached as they are, you just got to go fight and see what's up. You can't try to do too much. You can't try to play outside yourself. You just got to be the best version of you and see where the smoke clears at the end of the night.
Again, Coach Trevor Williams joining us on the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. Coach, we've got your thoughts on Rome. You all will end the season this week and then have a bye week. Is that schedule with the bye at the end, especially now that you guys are going, you are in the postseason? Is that something that you prefer to have a bye week going in the off season, or do you? Or does it make a difference playing a game in week 12 and then again in week 1 of the postseason? What's the thought behind that? Just either way.
Yeah, it's a whole lot better with your ticket punch than it was a year ago when we were in limbo and didn't know. That was a tough week, I can tell you that. So it'll be a little bit easier there. But, you're excited to get some guys healthy, to get some guys some rest. We're excited. Last year, one of the things that I thought went really well was we kind of did a young guy scrimmage. We were able to get some JV guys and some of our young guys some reps in practice and kind of do a little scrimmage scenario and get a sneak peek into some future. So we're excited about that side of it. But obviously, when you talk crossover regions, we should have some clarity on who we might play. Some playoff scenarios might be a little cleared up from our region. So hopefully it gives you an extra week to prepare to get healthy, and hopefully it's an advantage going into week 1 of the playoffs.
Well, Coach, again, we appreciate you joining us this week, and anytime we get to talk playoffs with a Cherokee County team, that gets us excited. We like to follow our local teams, and you guys, as we mentioned, seeding still up in the air. You guys can control your own destiny with the victory and maybe a little bit of help. Still in contention for a region title. I'm just throwing that out there. Sometimes you have to manifest things, Coach. So I'm trying to speak that into it. I'm trying to speak it into existence here, but nonetheless, as you mentioned, you guys will have a tough matchup this week for sure at the Grizzly Den, and then you'll have the week off, and then we'll all be waiting with bated breath to see what happens over in Region 7. But Coach, I don't know, this probably sounds premature, but we do want to congratulate you again on punching your ticket to the postseason. That's a big deal, especially in the upper classifications in the state of Georgia. You've done something, and we look forward to catching your game on Friday night and wish you the best of luck.
Yes, sir. I appreciate it, guys. Y'all have a good night.
So, again, thank you to Coach Williams for joining us again on the podcast. Always great to talk to him. Last time we'll talk to him in the regular season, as we mentioned, a bye week going into it. So, we'll see how the playoffs work out. But as of right now, that will be his final interview for the regular season. How about that?
Man, hard to believe time is winding down.
I know.
It just seems like yesterday we were interviewing all 6 county coaches and, everybody, starting out fresh, and now we're getting down to the nitty-gritty.
Absolutely. Well, I tell you what, we talked about it at the beginning of the show. We have John Reid calling in. He's the head coach at Rome. We really appreciate him taking some time and talking to us. Again, not the hometown crowd here or anything like that, but it's going to be interesting to hear his perspective on the Rome Wolves and maybe get a little stack up of what he thinks about Cherokee County as well.
I agree. I'm looking forward to it. Let's go ahead and bring in Coach Reid.
And joining us now is the head coach of the Rome Wolves, Coach John Reid. Coach, thank you for being with us.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Absolutely, Coach. We're looking forward to it and looking forward to seeing your team on Friday. Before we get into the matchup on Friday, I want to take a look back at the season as you guys have consistently been one of the top teams in Georgia and specifically North Georgia now, especially in 6A. You took over the program in 2015 and you've got a couple of state titles there at Rome. I want to ask, with your philosophy, how does it seem that you guys are able to maintain that level of competitiveness and winning so consistently in the program?
Well, I think it's two things. It's a good question. I mean, we bring them up. Some of the kids that are on the team right now were second graders. We started really putting this program on the map. And so it's kind of a tradition, first and foremost, in our town. And that's the way we want it. And then they come up through our youth football program that we created, through our middle school, through our weight room. And then once they get on the field for us, we kind of develop that athlete to play football, and then we've got a mentality that Rome football is built on toughness and never say die attitude.
Coach, looking back on this team, especially the senior class, it looks like they've experienced a lot of success over the past few seasons. Week in and week out, we see the scores. We know, looking over the last couple of years, what you all have been able to accomplish against region opponents, I think holding them to like 4.5 points a game or something ridiculous like that. How have you all been able to keep these young men from becoming complacent week in and week out when they're winning games by such large margins?
It's something we're fighting right now. I always got an eye on that. But, our goal is to win region, win state, and have an undefeated season. Now, some teams I won't push that hard because they're just not talented enough, but they understand it's part of the process and that you just got to take step by step. We break it down into 3 seasons, the first 5, the second 5, the last 5. So we're trying to be undefeated in the second 5. So I think they can grasp that a little bit. And we never, ever tell them, we never underestimate an opponent no matter what their record is.
That's a good way to look at it, Coach. I want to jump into the X's and O's just a little bit here. We're not as deep in the X's and O's as some people, but from watching your team over the season a little bit, you guys maybe block on the perimeter better than any team I've seen in high school football. Your receivers not only are obviously very talented with the ball in their hand, but they do a great job blocking for each other, and especially in the running game. Is that something that you emphasize with that position group, and how are they able to do it so effectively game in and game out?
Well, their coach, Will Spohr, does a great job with them, but, our offense is different. And when we think about it, is we have 6 running backs on the field. One of those guys being the quarterback and the 4 outside guys and a running back. And running back's got to block. And so with the receivers, our blockers, if we don't block on the perimeter, we don't have an offense.
Well said, Coach. Speaking of offense and those receivers, it's one of the things I think week in and week out, if you read the press clippings from Rome, it seems like somebody else is having a big day every day, whether it's Tenarius Stallings, DK Daniel, Nick Hester, McDermott, Chance Arthur, and even Reese. Those guys I feel like get a lot of the press clippings. What is your offensive line? How is that? How do those guys stack up in terms of teams of the past, and how are they able to set the table for you guys?
Well, we have some talent in offensive line. The 2 tackles can run, and they really are faster than a lot of people's tight ends. So it allows us to do some pull schemes with them that not a lot of people can do. And it's really one of our strengths, and we have just enough depth there where we rotate a lot of guys in. When you started mentioning all those guys, Brayshawn Jackson's another one. I think we had 6 different people score last week. So, but getting back to the offensive line, if you don't have that, you don't have a defensive line, you're not going to have a championship season. So we're lucky to have those guys. Got a great offensive line coach, and Buck Hansen, and he does a great job with those kids.
Coach, want to turn your attention to the defense because you guys are only allowing just over 7 points per game, which we can't ignore there. That's a great stat to have. And by my count, no rushing touchdowns on the year either. So unbelievable stat there. And I think a big part of that might be Jaden Harmon, your big linebacker, junior, 4-star talent, obviously getting some big-time attention from Power 5 programs. You've coached a lot of talented players in your time at Rome. what is his speed and dynamic and explosiveness? What is that like when you see him out on the field? And you know, obviously getting him back next year will be huge for you guys. But talk a little bit about him on that defensive side of the ball.
Yeah, I mean, he's playing the perfect position for him right now in his skill set. I'm not so sure they play fast dudes and the inside linebacker spot, so I'm not sure that might not be a position for him in the future. But for us right now, putting him to the field causes a lot of problems out there. He can run down anybody. I think he ran sub 4.5 at Tennessee camp, so he's a lethal weapon. And you know, you coach a lot of good players. In the case of you coach one that'll play on Sunday, and he has that chance.
Coach, I want to turn the attention back to your offense. And again, Coach John Reid, the head coach of the Rome Wolves, joining us on the North Georgia Sports Report. You've been coaching for a long time, and you've coached a lot of good teams, whether down in Tifton at Tift County, East Paulding. You had some time up in Tennessee, and certainly in Rome. Reese Fountain and DK Daniel are two players who have broke records at Rome. In terms of where these guys rank, and I know you probably don't have you maybe you have favorites. I don't want you to put you on the spot here with that, but how good are these two young men in terms of some of the guys that you've had an opportunity to coach on the offensive side of the football?
Well, we've had some great ones too, and you know, we had a kid a few years back that went to Florida International that I thought was a great. Xavier was a great slot receiver. You know, I coached Randall Cobb at Alcoa, so he was pretty good. Yeah.
We might have heard of him, Coach. Yeah.
Yeah. You know what? All of them have in common is Randall and DK and Reese is they're all like outstanding students. So they pick up on things really quick and great people. DK is one of our captains. Reese rolls out there at captain also. So first of all, that's one aspect that I wanted to mention. And then they work at practice. It means something to them. And they go about their business, try to get better every day, and it shows.
Coach, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Will.
That's okay. And to wrap this up with you here, as we've got the game coming up on Friday, we'll be out there at Creekview covering this game. Wanted to talk a little bit about your opponent in Creekview. You guys have obviously been able to handle the region so far, and including the win over Sequoia by a wide margin. You guys will come back over to Canton and take on the Grizzlies. What do you see on film that Creekview does that may present some challenges for your program, and what are you looking for out of this game on Friday?
Well, they got good players that seem to play for each other and for their school, and the coaches do a good job with them. They're good in all three aspects of the game, and you know they try to be I don't know if they try. They are multiple in offense and defense, so they move around a lot, get a lot of motions on offense, a lot of switches and trades, and on defense they're going to put pressure on you. They're going to move and change gaps and so forth. And it makes it difficult because, you know, you can lose focus and your eye discipline can become bad if you don't really work hard in practice and that's what their goal is.
Once again, wrapping it up with Coach John Reid, the head coach of the Rome Wolves. Coach, you all will be on the road again, and those of us in Cherokee County who have been in here for a while are familiar with that road trip across Highway 20 and up to Rome, up that way. Does your team ever get road weary, or what's that like being the only team kind of an outlier in a region, whether it was with the Cherokee County schools or the Paulding County schools? How do you manage that road schedule being kind of out on the island in Rome?
Well, first of all, I did a great job. We have 7 home games out of the 10.
Well played, Coach.
So I handled it that way. Our school and our superintendent and principal, everybody does a great job of letting us maintain a routine. So they let the kids out early enough so we can eat. And so we try to keep things as normal as possible and on the road. And the other thing that helps is we don't play on our campus. So really every time we play, we got to drive to Barron. So it does, you know, that helps right there. And we try to do that. And it's a really good question because that's what makes the difference between home and road. You know, that's why people like to be at home, because you get out of your element, you get out of your routine, and high school kids, teenagers don't do very well with that.
Absolutely. Well, Coach, it sounds like you have dialed into some success at Rome, and again, you guys have done a fantastic job in your 8 years over there. And I was going to ask if there must be something special in the water over there in the Coosa River that you guys are drinking, because you guys have been lights out. We look forward to taking in firsthand the Rome Wolves. We wish you a safe journey over here into Cherokee County, and best of luck on Friday night. And again, we appreciate you taking some time to talk to us here on the North Georgia Sports Report.
Oh, no problem, guys. Thanks for having us on there.
So again, thank you to Coach Reid for joining us. Looking forward to seeing his team on Friday as they'll take on Creekview, and it is that time. Let's talk about this game. Again, Stationhead app, stationhead.com. Also, northgasportsnetwork.com/live. That's where you can find us at all times. We'll be going live at 7 o'clock, 7:30 with live play-by-play coverage. And if you're a fan of the other teams too, make sure you join us as well, because we'll be keeping you updated. And probably by the end of this week, we'll have a pretty clear playoff picture, unless crazy things happen. So, join us and get a little segmented post-game show where we'll talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's an opportunity for the folks in extreme northwest Georgia who may or may not have, if you're looking for a way to keep up with the game or keep up with this region, if you have any interest in the region, we certainly pride ourselves in a little bit of knowledge in Region 66A and the crossover and in some aspects, other games across the state. But we welcome you into our broadcast booth. Coop, again, thanks to Coach Williams as always. Thanks to Coach Reid to coming on. That was we appreciate him spending a little bit of time with us. I think what people don't know, before we got on the air with him, he said, "Guys, I talked to y'all for 45 minutes or 5 minutes. Just let me know." And so we really do appreciate his candor and his time this evening. And Will, this is a game that I think the question we had with him about complacency is I think if you're going to beat a team like Rome, who's kind of flying high, is maybe one of the things that has to break your way. You can talk about turnovers, you can talk about time of possession. You also talk about, man, maybe they were just complacent that day and didn't have their best game, and maybe your team has something to do with that. I think so. For me, I think Creekview's going to have to find a way to get some pressure on Reese Fountain. He's been good I want to say his entire life. He holds a career touchdown pass. I believe he holds the all-time career passing yardage mark. I think DK Daniel now holds the career touchdown reception mark for the Rome Wolves, and they've had some pretty good ones over there. You got to find a way to disrupt their passing game. And the thing that makes Rome so difficult is it's not like Reese is not dropping back. It's not 3, 4, 5 step drop and him waiting for a play to develop. They're really forcing the action. It's almost like a fast break offense that Rome runs, and so you got to find a way to disrupt that offense and get them off schedule. He's not going to make a ton of mistakes, but I think you've got to find a way to put pressure on the quarterback. And you might get beat deep once or twice, but I think you've got to, within your, if you're Creekview within the confines of your defense, find a way to get pressure on the quarterback.
Yeah, the key to stopping their offense is a disruptive defensive line, which may be the case for most, but this is a offense that's going to look very odd, but maybe familiar to some people because it's very, very similar to Tennessee's offense. The amount of stacks they run with receivers, the personnel they run in the box, it's all a numbers game. And when it comes to a numbers game, you need somebody who can beat those upfront blocks and take them on 2 at a time, or somebody that can get to the next level. Because it's going to be tough. That's the only way around it. And like he said in the interview, they view that they have 6 running backs across the board. You got to play one-on-one football, and that puts pressure on you as a defense to make the open field tackles, especially when some of these guys are 3, 4-star talents across the board. So, and here's the thing about Reese that I think is most interesting watching him on tape. He is super intelligent. He's a football intelligent young man. He's going to be able to dissect defenses fairly well. I would imagine, we didn't ask Coach Reid, but I imagine Reese is a guy that spends a lot of time in the film room, because watching him on tape, he is able to pinpoint what a defense is going to do. And it's very, very tough when you have a field general who can see through the decoys and things like that. So, Coach Williams, a defensive guy, defensive coordinator, he's going to have to draw up some good plans.
Yeah, he is, and you mentioned that about Reid in the film. You kind of Coach Reid kind of alluded to that when he talked about him being a great student, off the football field. You can only imagine what that means for him on the football field. Again, you mentioned Coach Williams. He's got his hands full, certainly game planning against Rome. I think one of the key matchups, we mentioned this last week, Creekview, one of the better offensive lines in Cherokee County. Certainly, you can talk about Sequoia as one of the good ones as well, but Creekview's going to have to find a way to establish a run game, and I don't know if they use a bevy of backs, whether it be Mason Munn. We saw Agamang get some carries. Grayson Davis got some carries last week. We know Austin Guest is a dual-threat quarterback. But man-to-man, blocking, they're going to have to find a way to neutralize a downhill attacking Rome defense. I think and Coach Williams also alluded to this, sustained drives, keep those guys off the field, because some of your best defense might be seeing, Reese Fountain look at that clock drain down and that explosive offense not being able to get on the field. I think once Rome gets rolling against fast break and it's downhill and it's tough to stop that avalanche of points. I think one of the ways to keep them on the sideline, long sustained drives, and you got to convert. This team has not had to play from behind a whole lot. I know that Carrollton had their number this year, but they go down to Sequoia 3-0, and we thought, oh man, this is going to be a fantastic ball game. And then they woke up, and it was Katie Bar at the door. Here comes the big bad Rome Wolves, and I think you just have to protect this game getting out of control. A lot of talent over there on that Rome sideline. They're used to not playing at their high school. Coach Reid talked about that. This is they play at Barron Stadium, so they're traveling, in air quotes, over to their home games. They're traveling to their away games. So this is a team that, again, I'll go back to my first point. You're going to have to do everything well, and then also they're going to have an off night.
Well, I think that the key to this game is Austin Guest, because Rome's going to make you play 11-on-11 football, and it's a numbers game like we talked about. Your offense has to do the same, because there's not a lot of offensive guys that you're going to have that are going to be able to win some one-on-one matchups. This defense across the board is sound. So for Creekview, you need Austin Guest to be that guy, to be the 11th man, and make them decide that they can beat you one-on-one, and that does allow your team to get some opportunities. We've seen them have a lot of success over the middle with the tight end pass. I don't think that will be as open as it usually is. I think their success will come in the scramble plays. And, you really, in a lot of sense, to beat a team like this, you need some backyard football stuff to happen. Yeah. You need some stuff to go your way, and I think the key is to force Rome into mistakes. I like your point about when Rome is a lot like a snowball, where it gets momentum and it just builds and builds and builds until it plows you over.
Right.
I think Rome is that way. I think if you start to see him get out of control, it's hard to stop them. It's hard to slow that down. So you need to start fast. Creekview's got to start fast, and they got to start quick, and they've got to do it in a lot of different ways. And I think the other thing, too, is Creekview can't be one-dimensional. We saw Sequoia eliminate the passing game they completed 3 passes out of 15 attempts for 36 yards, 2 interceptions, I think, in that game. Creekview can't do that. They are going to have to work them laterally to some extent. And I think the one thing that I'll say about this Rome defense that you probably aren't used to us saying, you don't need the home run ball. Don't worry about the home run ball. Carrollton didn't have the home run ball. Forget about the home run ball. You're not going to get it either. So focus on the slow pace underneath, and when you get the 4-yard play, take the 4-yard play. If you're a play caller, don't get so caught up in the, now it's 2nd and 6, 3rd and 2, we're not moving it fast enough, which I don't think this Creekview team will. I think by Coach Williams' approach, like he talked about with us, he's happy to do that, and that is key. Don't think, man, we need a chunk play right here, because that's a stat that you hear a lot of people talk about. Yards per play, that's a big difference in the game. Somewhat, but at a certain extent, too, take what they're giving you. So that's how I would live this game. I'm cool with the underneath stuff. I'll gladly watch Creekview march down the field in 6 minutes if that's what it takes, and we'll talk about the 4-yard out route that keeps working until they run bump and run coverage on you or force you to do something else. So the key is to stay patient, and I think the key for the players is this is a playoff game. this is a playoff game because this is the quality opponent that you're going to face. Whether you're going to face Blessed Trinity or Alpharetta, this is it. And then if you win that first round, you're going to go play Gainesville most likely. So get used to it. If you want to win a playoff game, if you want to win a couple playoff games, if you want to make this year one of those years that people remember at Creekview, you're going to need to prove that you can do this. So no moral victories here, guys. Let's get after it, and let's see what we can do against Rome, because that's going to be the key in this one. If I'm the coach, that's what I'm telling my guys.
Interesting points from Coach Cooper over here. Are you lobbying for an analyst job somewhere in north central Georgia?
I will gladly take any position out there. All you have to do is call me, and my advice is free. Which probably means it's not worth anything.
Well, I was about to say, that's what Andy Griffith told Opie Taylor one time. Opie asked Andy for some advice, and Andy said, Opie, advice is free. You get what you pay for.
That's exactly right.
So, in any event, Coop, one last point, I think, Creekview, my thought, I'm not going to give any, X's and O's here because unless it's on the hardwood, I have no real basis for my analysis here. If it's a basketball, I can tell you all about it. But I think Creekview is going to have to match Rome's physicality.
Yes.
They're going to – I think this is a team that can. I don't know if they will. But you mentioned this before. You see it. You see that Rome – the ROMB on the side of the helmet with the wolf emblem, and it's like, oh my gosh, here come the guys that nobody can beat. You can't walk into that game like that. If you do that, you've already been beat. Tom Brady tells a story of Ndamukong Suh when he played when Suh was with the Dolphins and Brady was with the Bucs, and Suh goes, he's getting back in the backfield, and Brady's like, oh my gosh, this guy is like kicking our butts, and Brady, he's kind of talking him up a little bit, and he's like, hey, man, stay out of my backfield. And Suh looks at him, and he's like, he's an explicative. He's like, I'm not your bleeping friend. And just walks back to his huddle. And Brady was like, oh, crap, this guy is he's going to be in my stuff all day long. Whereas, he said, if you get guys come up and say, oh, my gosh, Mr. Brady, Tom's like, oh, we got these guys. And I think if you're Creekview, you got to be like, hey, I'm not your freaking friend, and we're not talking about bad sportsmanship here, but you've got to be able to match the physicality. And Rome plays with, and they play hard. They're well coached, and you just have to match that intensity and let them know that you're not backing down.
Well, look, as much as the wolf head on the side of the helmet means something, equally as does the grizzly head on the side of the helmet. I mean, people, let's not forget Creekview for a long time, not so much recently, but for a long time, really dominated some teams that have evened out recently. But I'm just saying that if you're going to pull on that historical side and you're going to think about what it actually means and be scared of that logo, I wouldn't. Maybe some other teams could, but Creekview typically has a little bit of arrogance about them. That's a good thing. It's not a bad thing.
Look, Rome hadn't lost to a Cherokee County team since 2020, and I don't think it happens this week.
It'll be tough. It would be big news. And again,
the state, yes.
Yeah, we would have a lot of things to talk about. Again, we'll cover this game. Station Head app, stationhead.com, North GA Sports Network.com. So join us there. Look, I mean, we're excited to be doing the game. We appreciate Coach Reid joining us, and as always, our county coaches appreciate Coach Williams for being back with us. It's going to be an interesting dynamic. We're excited to be back at the Den, at least for one more time, depending on what happens. Playoff games could be there. We'll have to see. But we're glad to be back and excited to be jumping back in the booth.
Absolutely. Coop, just a few more games around the area I want to talk about. Actually, more than a handful of games. In Region 5, 7A, Kennesaw Mountain will host Wheeler, and then Walton and Osborne will play. Again, those games crucial for just region seedings in 5-7A. Over in 8-7A, Buford will play Mountain View, Central Gwinnett will play Collins Hill, and Decula will play Mill Creek. Buford looks like they're locked into that number 2 seed. Mountain View, Collins Hill kind of battling it out for that 3-4 seed. Crossover region for Region 6-6A is Region 7-6A. Blessed Trinity and Alpharetta playing a crucial matchup. Alpharetta trying to keep pace with Roswell. So far, they're undefeated in region play. They've got a big game this week against Blessed Trinity. They'll be on the road. Lassiter and Sprayberry trying to stay alive for maybe that 4th seed, and then Pope playing Johns Creek. Pope's got their work cut out for them. Johns Creek's just having a rough go over this season, playing the season out. No other games around the area in 5A. Cartersville and Dalton playing for a region title. This could get very interesting here if Dalton beats Cartersville. They'll be the number 1 seed. Cartersville, chaos could ensue. And then another game, very interesting, Calhoun versus Cass. This is the last game of the season for all of these teams in Region 7 5A. The loser of that game is out of the playoffs. And Calhoun is a team that is ranked in the top 10. Cass is a team that has seen some ups and downs. We saw them early in the season against Rome, who we'll see this week. So very interesting game. That's a tough region, that Region 7 over in Class 5A. Other games kind of around the north and northwest Georgia area, Central Carrollton and Northwest Whitfield. That's the game. The Lions of Central Carrollton have an opportunity to win a region title there. Northwest Whitfield can play spoiler. Adairsville and Bremen. Adairsville up in Bartow County looking for a region title. Both of these teams come in undefeated in region play. The winner wins a share of that region title, and ultimately they've got a game left, but would hold the head-to-head. Nobody behind them can catch them. So in essence, the region title game, White County and Pickens, trying to find a way to pick up a couple more wins. They'll be on the road at White County. Dawson County is going to host Lumpkin. Dawson, a little bit disappointing season from their perspective. Lumpkin is again, the Fighting Mason Sullins. They're going to be, I think they're favored to win that region. I don't know if Dawson really has the firepower they've had previously. And sneaking over into Northeast Georgia Coop, a game I will have my eyes on. The Commerce Tigers will host the Rabun County Wildcats. Commerce has owned the series historically. They have not. Rabun County has won, I think it's 6 or 7 consecutive region titles. They finally lost a region game a couple of weeks ago. Elbert County Blue Devils went up and beat Rabun County. Then Commerce went into the Granite Bowl, one of the most amazing stadiums in the state of Georgia, probably the country. The Granite Bowl over in Elberton. Commerce beat the Elbert County Blue Devils last week, and now they'll have a chance to win a region title outright. And this is Class A Division I. Very interesting region over there, set up. I think the interesting thing about Commerce is they've got 2 1,000-yard rushers on that ball club. Tyshawn Wiggins and Jaden Daniels have gone over 1,000 yards. You don't see that a whole lot in high school football with 2 1,000-yard rushers. So just a great story over there in Jackson County.
Yeah, a lot of great games on tap. You mentioned just from a local angle that Alpharetta Blessed Trinity is really not only for the chance to keep pace with Roswell, but also it's most likely the 2 seed.
Absolutely.
So, for us here, you're talking about who does Creekview have to go play if everything sits the way it does, or who does Sequoia have to go play, or if really crazy things happen, who does Rome have to go play?
Could you imagine in the first round game if Rome got upset and similar to Langston Hughes, their first round opponent.
Imagine being the 2 seed and looking across and saying, "Oh, good, we get to host Rome."
Nobody would like that.
Upset.
And it's stranger things have happened.
Stranger things have happened.
Dude, it's been a heck of a show, man.
Yeah, I feel like we've gotten enough in. I hope everybody feels informed now. Again, join us Friday night. Again, we'll be going live around 7 o'clock. We don't always hit that number. Sometimes we like to meander and discuss and have some conversations amongst ourselves.
We get stopped. We stop. We talk.
Man of the people. What can we say? But either way, back to the Grizzly Den. Join us 7 o'clock. We appreciate you all for being with us here tonight. Again, we'll be back next Tuesday, so make sure you join us once again right back here on the North Georgia Sports Report podcast. Will Cooper and Art Mosley. Have a good night, everybody. We'll see you on Friday.